Xinjiang, China's far western province, is, like a lot of places, a geographic construction, and that we accept it as unitary today has a lot to do with its history. It was first created as a single province at the end of the Qing Empire, late 19th century, and that happened in part because all of its components were conquered at about the same time in the middle of the 18th century, 100 or more years earlier. And I've chosen this map from the Chinese Academy of Sciences displaying different soil types, in part because it's just very pretty, but also because it highlights diversity of the different soil types and therefore plants and therefore ecologies and consequently human realities as we zoom in here for detail. To understand this place better historically, geographically, I'd like you to think of it very roughly in two parts. There are mountains more or less ringing the whole place, but an additional mountain range from west to east that divides the two sections north and south, these two kind of depressions or basins. The southern basin is the Taklamakan Desert in the west, going into the Turpan Depression in the east, and I think this is the mental image a lot of foreigners have when they think of Xinjiang, if they think of it at all. It's quite arid. There are oasis cities of the Silk Road. Historically, the place was called Altashar for those settlements. There wasn't too much of a collective identity here beyond those settlements, or therefore resistance, and so the Qing was able to conquer the place almost as an afterthought without difficulty. The northern half was a different thing entirely. It is called frequently the Dzungar Basin, named after the people the Qing Empire was so intent on exterminating. And it looks sometimes like Switzerland, maybe. Green meadows, mountains in the distance, gorgeous lakes. But it wasn't the land that drew the Qing Empire out here exactly. It was really the people, the Dzungar Empire, with which the Qianlong Emperor and his grandfather were both almost unduly obsessed. The Dzungars were the last great mobile steppe empire, and the Qing were intent on ending the perceived threat they posed, which they did by exterminating them as a people, and that is the subject for a different video. It left the Qing Empire with both a big problem and maybe an opportunity, all of this land without people living in it. That potentially makes it much harder to hold onto without people. I mean, how can you do anything, even provision an army? On the other hand, maybe you can relieve some of the pressures in overcrowded areas of the interior by shifting people here. And so the Qing has big programs to encourage the settlement of this area, bringing in all sorts of people, drawing people up from the south, Taranchis, who are basically from these Silk Road cities but are settled and kind of do farming, some Han Chinese people from the interior, actually tribal Manchus are just sent here as a kind of garrisoning force, and the last place that Manchu really exists as a living spoken language of life is in northern Xinjiang, where the descendants of that Manchu garrisoning force continued to live. And it wasn't just about different ethnicities, it was modes of life, because there were military colonies, civilian colonies, and under different schemes depending upon when and how they were initiated. And for all these reasons, Xinjiang has been a really productive and interesting place for those people who want to study and understand the nature of Qing imperialism, because you'll remember that for the first century and a half, the Qing Empire expanded enormously, starting in the northeast in Manchuria, capturing what we might call China proper, conquering that, bringing that into the empire. There's Mongolia, there's Kokonor, Kham, Tibet, Taiwan, and finally Xinjiang. In all those other places, though, the Qing Empire was dealing with local power holders and on-the-ground realities. In Greater Mongolia, for example, it happened over a much longer period of time and almost entirely through negotiation, as these Mongol princes, the Khalkhas first, came over into the Qing system, bringing along with them their own political traditions and followers and more. Northern Xinjiang was the polar opposite, a kind of tabula rasa where the political system and the people had been entirely wiped out. And so we can see the Qing having the freest possible hand in its policies and experiments. And it is the consequences of all of those choices, for good or ill, some seemingly very strange, others shockingly familiar even today, that we are still dealing with even now in 2025.